Just a day after finishing up eFest 2015 in Champaign, Illinois, we visit, of course, the mecca for all model aviation, the Academy of Model Aeronautics. And lo and behold, there is a world-class museum here that, for somebody who grew up with model aviation before I was old enough to even think of full-scale aviation, I'm just geeking out right and left. I'm a little kid again. I'm looking at all this, and you're just going to need to mop up after me because I am drooling over things I'm seeing here that I grew up with, that I wanted to play with, some things I did play with. But Mike, tell us about this museum. You have done an extraordinary job.
Well, thank you very much for coming and visiting. The museum here is located on the AMA's International Air Modeling Center. Almost as soon as it gets warm, we have visitors from all over the world who come and visit the museum. The museum tells the history of flying model aviation more than 100 years before the Wright Brothers. And then we try to cover all three disciplines: free flight, radio control, and control line, and the evolution within each one of those disciplines. So we have the very first control line airplane, the Miss Shirley. We have the Good Brothers, a reproduction of their Big Guff. And with each one of those, you can really see with their airplanes how the aircraft have changed, how they've evolved both in terms of power, but also in terms of design and the materials used in their construction.
Well, some of the stuff you have here is literally parts of history and in many cases predate any of the manned flights by the Wrights or other persons unknown.
That's right. In terms of our visitors, that's really something that they really don't understand generally. About 2/3 of our visitors are not modelers. They come in because we're a museum and something of interest. And so when they come in, to be able to see airplanes that predate the Wright Brothers flight by 100 years is really amazing to them, to see a steam-powered airplane from 1848 or the new compressed air-powered airplane from 1914. Those are things that really are amazing for the visitors to come in to see and to understand all that evolved. And then to understand again that the Wright Brothers 1903, 1905 flights, that the very first model airplane clubs were being formed by 1909 in Chicago and New York, and the first national contest for model airplanes was already happening in 1915. So really a lot going hand in hand, both in models and in full-scale aviation, all at the same time.
This has to be a monumental undertaking, first to make sure that everything's cared for with the respect that it deserves. And then, of course, catalog and record and properly index everything. The work here must be monumental.
Well, it's a constant ongoing process, and space is a big issue too. There are so many pieces in the collection. Back and back, we have a lot of airplanes that we try to rotate back and forth on display and whatnot. But a lot of people don't really realize the amount of paperwork and things that are associated with the museum to make sure things are done right. But then, as you said, to be able to care for the artifacts, but then also to try to focus with the special interest groups and all the different disciplines to identify the different types of airplanes that are in existence and try to document that history and to try to make sure that we continue to record that history.
Since the early days of powered flight, pilots have struggled with landing in crosswinds. In fact, crosswinds and wind gusts cause more landing accidents than fog, thunderstorms, and icing combined. That's where the Redbird X-Wind SE comes in. By placing pilots in gusty crosswind conditions for extended periods of time, the X-Wind SE gives instructors all the time they need to teach the pilot the proper techniques for landing in crosswind conditions. For more information on Redbird X-Wind SE and Redbird's entire line of flight training devices, visit www.redbirdflightsimulation.com. It's
somewhat humbling to come in here and realize that many of the things I've seen in the quote-unquote full-scale museums found their start in models on display here.
Yes, models are an important tool for research and development. I mean, not only in terms of the individuals who are designing those, because a lot of the people who designed full-scale aircraft started with models. That's where they got their initial introduction into aviation, but then even as they designed full-scale aircraft, they still modeled as a hobby, and a lot of their ideas, their practices, they were able to test at a relatively inexpensive cost, as well as in terms of pilot, you're on the ground, so you can test theories and ideas. And in the museum here, we have the opportunity to showcase some of those early aircraft that were very monumental in terms of the development of aviation.
Well, one of my favorite museum denizens, a fellow who ran the EA Museum, Adam Smith, who did a spectacular job up there, would be prompting me right now to ask the two questions that are near and dear to the heart of anybody trying to keep a museum alive. One, what about people who may have articles of interest, i.e. aircraft that they played with as kids or even now, or things that were passed down or stuff up in the attic? How do they know if it's something you may be interested in? And how do you support an effort like this?
Well, the organization actually started the museum when the Academy of Model Aeronautics was in Reston, Virginia. There were significant individuals who recognized that this history did need to be saved, that the full-scale aviation museums, while they were touching on things, they were primarily looking at it in the aspect of a model airplane, just a representation. And so they saw that there was a need for a museum that really told the history of model aviation. And so beginning in the early 1980s, they started to collect and so forth. And then when they moved out here from Reston to Muncie, they really then took the next step in terms of this museum. For collections, we are actively collecting. Even though it looks like we're full, there are a lot of aircraft, a lot of pieces that we don't have representations of. And so the unfortunate thing is, because there are so many events, it is somewhat difficult for us to exactly say what airplanes are significant. So that's where we rely on the special interest groups as well as some key modelers to help us out. But if a person has an airplane in their collection that was their dad's, their grandfather's, or they have some radio equipment or an engine or a kit, what we ask them to do is to contact us ahead of time, and we have an acquisition committee that meets quarterly to review prepared displays and airplanes. And so we have a form that they fill out and submit to us, and then the committee meets, and the committee is composed of very knowledgeable modelers who can look not only at the collection that we have here, but also key pieces that we might need, and then we can either acquire the airplane that way. If it's a kit or a radio or an engine or magazines or books, things like that, oftentimes it's a matter of just us going through our computer inventory, seeing what we do have, and then trying to collect representations of pieces. Obviously, we can't have every single engine as much as we might like. We can't have every single kit. Space does not allow it. So it's a matter of trying to make sure that we have good representations of different manufacturers and different types to show, again, just like with the airplanes, how pieces have evolved.
Rebuilding the sport aviation world one aviator at a time. That's A&N's new Aero Sports ebook series, your resource guide to the ultimate in aviation adventures. Aero Sport will feature the straight skinny on learning and enjoying 16 unique aviation sports, from ultralights and ballooning to aerobatics, gyroplanes and hang gliders to parachuting, home builds and general aviation to RC models. All this and more will be coming soon with the new updatable Aero Sport guide for your favorite electronic devices. Get your advance order in now at www.aero-sport.net.
As I started with at the beginning, I was in awe then, I am in awe now. This touches me to the core because of how I got into aviation and all the things that occurred 18,000 plus hours ago, and sanding balsa and gluing this and monocoating that and painting this and crashing this and rebuilding it. This is emotional, and it's an absolutely extraordinary display, for which I got to tell you, one, thank you, and two, congrats. Amazing piece of work.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming out, and we encourage not only modelers, but anybody who's interested in aviation to come visit the museum and visit the flying site, see some of the events going on site.
Now, when is the museum open? Is there an admission fee, and how do people make their way out here?
If you are a member of the AMA, it is part of your membership, so it's one of the benefits. You get free admission. If you are a non-member and you are visiting, it's $4 for an adult and $2 for children. I always recommend people go to the museum's website and be able to get updates, especially during holidays when we get traffic coming through. That gives you the most current information for our hours.
Mike, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.